So I was just, yeah, surprised there aren't a lot of folks here, but that's okay. I was wondering, I wanted to direct the question to you, Mark. You're the chairman of the Parks and Rec Commission, isn't that correct? And I was wondering if, dealing with the property, if you consider that a conflict of interest, being with Parks and Rec and then dealing with property that they're interested in. I don't know if that has come up in discussions or if you consider that. You have? Okay.
Well-
Yeah, usually there's no
Yeah,
give
we
and
usually,
take.
this
There's no
isn't a
give
back
and
and
take. Yeah, I
forth,
know,
right?
there's no
Just, but
give and,
if
I
you wanna,
understand.
give us
But-
your thoughts, we
Yeah, but
appreciate
those are my thoughts, that right now, the school district is in a tremendous position when it comes to disposition of the property over there, because it is very, very valuable, and it's more valuable to a certain entity than others. You know, I think of what Illich had to pay for some of the properties, you know, when he was expanding places, and what they had to pay for property building the bridge. So the property that LPS owns over there is, at 5 and Hubbard, is worth a tremendous amount of money, and I'm just hoping you'll get the maximum dollars for it. When I was on the board, I thought we were giving property away, basically. I know St. Mary's paid very, very little for the property that they bought off the district. And I was the one no vote on that. I didn't support selling to an entity that eventually is going to go into competition with you, maybe build a school. But those are just my thoughts on that LPS property over by the rec center, and I'm hoping you guys will have a really deep discussion about the true value of that property. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 2, our committee of the whole.
May I have a point of privilege?
Yes, Mrs. O'Quist.
Thank you, President Bradford. It was requested that at some point during the agenda this evening, that Mr. Etu and I share a brief update on the steps that have been taken thus far with regard to the request that has been made regarding varsity letters. So while you know that process is underway, we can certainly give you an update under the curriculum committee when Mr. Etu has completed his item on LCTC.
Thank you. We will note that, item B. Okay. All right. Committee of the whole. Item 2A is the MASB 2024 Spring Institute. Basically, that's just a notification if you are going to be signing up for that Spring Institute happening. Please let Teresa know that you're ready to, and we'll be voting on that. Oh, look, Mark's got it right here.
Yeah, you should have got it in the mail. I looked it over. I think out of all those classes, I can take 2. Take all the other.
That's true. Yes, Mrs. Acosta.
I know that since it's on the 20th and our next meeting, our next voting meeting is on the 18th, when would this have to be?
This is April.
Yeah, that's April, so this is,
Right.
we're going to be having
We are
our
putting it on
meeting
next
on the
Monday.
March, yeah,
Okay.
this next
March
Monday.
18th.
Oh,
Okay,
good
thank you.
question, yeah, this will be on for voting next Monday, so that's why, so that we'll be able to have it done prior.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if anybody's planning on taking any of those courses, let Mrs. Genta know in the office. Any other questions about that? Okay. Moving on to item 2B, the purchase agreement for sale of property to the city of Livonia. And we're going to discuss that this evening.
Yes, here comes Mr. Francis.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Well, you have the offer to purchase the real estate was in your packet. And I just want to take some time here because it's been a little while since the board discussed this at a study session, and that we've had some back and forth with the city on negotiating and getting a document put together. So thought it might be helpful for those in the public who are watching for the first time. I know we had an audience communication referencing this, and some people might watching not know, because we talked about this at length at study session, but now we are here on camera. So we wanted to talk a little bit about where this section of property is located, the purpose for it, et cetera, et cetera. So just to give a little background, at the former Bentley High School property, which is at 5 Mile, just east of here, we have the portion of property that many folks will recognize as where LJAL does their athletic practices and games and whatnot. So that's the eastern portion of that area, so east of the rec center. That is still LPS property, and we do have agreements with LJL, and they use that, and many families have experienced their time there, et cetera. So as I think many know around the city, that the city of Livonia is working on building a new senior center, and they do have property that the city of Livonia owns. They can build it and have entry and parking, et cetera, on their property, but for it to be a more, I guess, user-friendly experience for our seniors in Livonia, the city really wanted to have a separate entrance and a senior center only entrance, as opposed to have to go through the portion that is the recreational center, and to have some parking for the seniors who are going to be visiting there. So they had approached the district and asked if there was a portion of the land that belongs to Livonia Public Schools to be able to be sold to them, so they can make a proper senior center for the senior citizens of the city of Livonia. So we had the conversations with the city on what exactly the amount that they may have needed, et cetera. They did their due diligence. We did our due diligence. The city of Livonia had hired a company to do an appraisal on multiple properties, some that were former Livonia Public Schools properties, some in other neighborhoods and other areas that weren't Livonia Public Schools. Livonia Public Schools, we went to Mr. Bill Bowman, who the district's been using for many years with regard to property sales. He's an expert in the field. He did a full report on that area for Livonia Public Schools and cited sort of what the potential value of it would be, a portion of it taken out, what that might be, et cetera, et cetera. So having both of those documents, we were able to come to what we all believe is a good and a fair price. It is an actual amount that is labeled as the value of that property. So additionally, working with the city, they made sure that the way, after talking with the district, they made sure that the way that they were trying to get the piece of parcel, we all ensured that if the district had future use for it, not tomorrow, not next year, but in the future, there would still be a portion, and the way it would be configured would still have value if the district ever was looking in the future to perhaps develop on it or do something else in that space. So it's specifically approximately 4.08, and I know it sounds weird to say approximately and then give you a 0.08 at the end, but that is how attorneys do write these up. There has been a survey done on the property. That was the responsibility of the city as the purchasers. This piece of 4.08 acres is out of 17.14 acres that the district owns. So it is a smaller portion, but still a percentage of that land. And it's really, not to try to describe a map without having a map in front of me, but the board has seen where this is. It would be in that portion closer and all the way adjacent, touching 5 Mile, so that there can be a driveway in, a place to park, and for seniors to walk directly into the center. So it makes quite a bit of logical sense, and the piece that the district would sell, looking at all the information presented to us from our consultant, as well as taking into consideration a third-party independent appraisal that was done and purchased by the city, we really landed on $100,000 an acre as the appropriate amount This is an item or a number that comes in at similar to what in the area, schools that we recently, a few years ago, had sold at around $100,000 an acre. So the total price for the 4.018 acres in the agreement would ultimately be the $408,000. So that'd be $100,000 per acre. It is listed out. We had shared the first draft, so the purchase agreement, as always, whenever the district is selling a parcel, our attorney, our legal counsel draws up the documentation. We share with whoever the purchaser is. In this instance, it happens to be the city of Livonia. Their legal counsel looked it over, requested a few changes. They were very agreeable. Those changes were agreeable to Livonia Public Schools. On advice of our attorney, we made those changes in there, and the document that the board had in their packet and that you have in front of you would be the offer to purchase real estate that we would be using as the purchase agreement. Is there anything in the background, Mrs. Oquist, that?
No, you did a great job, Mr. Francis. The only thing I would emphasize is this absolutely is fair market value. It has been the assessment, there was an assessment done by both the city, as you had shared, and then Mr. Bowman has completed a full valuation of the property, of the entire Bentley property, as well as this portion of the property. So in total, it's just over 17 acres for the entire property. Just to assure anyone listening in the community that the use that is currently taking place at Bentley Field will continue. In fact, we're going to be doing some updates to the track, as the board knows. So the community and LJL will still be able to use the vast majority of that property. It really is the western and northwestern most portion of the Bentley property would be how it's best described, but it absolutely is fair market value. We did negotiate that based on the valuation that each entity received in comparables around not only the city, but around this region.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Mrs. Acosta?
For us that are directionally challenged, so the northwestern part, is that currently the parking lot?
Northwest, just to clarify what Mrs. Oak was saying, the northwestern corner of what LPS owns of that property. If someone stepped back and looked at the entire rec center or what 25 years ago was the full Bentley property, it's not that northwest corner, it's the section we own. So once you come, I'm going to say east on 5 Mile.
Okay, yes, I'm with you.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
If you're going towards Merriman,
Yes.
on the right-hand side is the rec center and the Bentley property that we own. There's actually that section that you can see you can pull into, not too far, almost adjacent to where that grandstand is, but it's none of this. It's actually still a little west of that, because none of this will
impede
or encroach upon the grandstand, the concession stand, the field. None of that. It's essentially, if you thought of kind of coming in on that right-hand turn, if you're going towards Merriman, they're going to have a rectangle. And I don't have it, I believe, in this document for you, but we did show when we did at the study session, there was a rendering that carved it out.
Yes,
And
thank you.
I can email that if you want to see that.
And it was for our community that makes great use of that property. I know that in case there were any questions or anyone challenges, I am, so I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
My question is, there is a parking lot in the front there. Will some of that acreage impede on that parking lot? So will the parking lot for the Bentley Field be slightly smaller?
I'd have to look again at how it got carved out, quite frankly.
Okay.
I don't believe there's any concern with that, because it's quite wide. It runs all along 5 Mile, and it's the most western portion that they're going to pick that piece up. Our parking lot area would be essentially still ours, because you have to go down a little further. It has what used to be that little, like the
Yes.
bus loop type of area. None of that is what we're selling.
Okay, perfect. Mrs. Bonnefield?
So I know when we were talking about the rec center, in relation to that, the tax collection fee that we're gonna talk about a little bit later, that at one point those negotiations had stalled and the mayor had said that she was going to go back and reconfigure the construction of the rec center without that parcel of land. And then I believe that later she came back with an offer. Is it true? Do we know if that not selling the property to them would stall the rec center, or have they not given us, talked about that?
I would say not selling the property would require them to change the current design. And so in that way, how long it would take for them to redesign that would be the portion that may delay the property. But my understanding is it could be erected with or without, but the optimal design included utilization of this property. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and so I think Mr. King just earlier made a really great point that, you know, this is a valuable piece of property. I just would like to point out that even though we have probably the ability to hold the city up for a much greater value, and possibly hold up the rec center, that we are still willing to work with the city in a fair manner. We've negotiated, and we are not extracting additional money simply to move the project forward, and that we are working with them at a fair market value to sell that property to them.
We are.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Johnson?
It's sort of in response to what Mr. King had alluded to earlier, that because of my position both across Farmington Road and here, when this matter comes to a vote, I will be abstaining.
Okay. All right.
Just want to make sure
Yep.
everybody know that. And Steve, if you're watching,
Yeah.
there's your response.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I know this is going to be put on a meeting scheduled for March 21st in the morning. So that will not be on our
Regular.
next regular agenda. It'll be on the special meeting for March 21st.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. All right. Moving on to item 3, the Finance Committee. And Mrs. Bonifield, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, President Bradford. Our
You're
first
welcome.
item tonight for the Finance Committee is A. Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Oakwist are going to help us out, and that will be for tax collection fee agreement with the city of Livonia.
Thank you. You want me to start
so-
with some background, or?
I'll give a little
Sound
bit of
good?
background, and then if you want to go over the agreement that we created, that would be
I can
great.
pass it around while you're
Sure, okay. As you know, our Board of Education, we have been discussing this for quite some time, so I'd like to just give a little bit of background. I think that will be helpful for anyone watching who may not have background on this issue. What we are bringing to you this evening is an updated tax collection agreement between Livonia Public Schools and the City of Livonia. In 1994, a tax collection agreement was signed between those two entities. And at that time, a fee was charged by the city, paid by the district for the collection of taxes. Over the past couple of years, Mrs. Smith and I have worked in collaboration with the Board of Education to address what we believe is an exorbitant fee that we have been paying for tax collection. As we had done research throughout Wayne County, we found that over 90% of districts pay no fee at all to the municipality that collects their taxes. Indeed, we do not, for instance, pay any tax collection fee to the city of Westland. And as you know, we have many homes in Westland, we have schools in Westland, and they do collect taxes on our behalf for the portion that are within LPS boundaries. So over the course of this agreement since 1994, the district has paid $10.7 million in tax collection fees to the city of Livonia. As we began to look at the impact of what is now almost $500,000 annually on our budget, we really sought the opportunity to talk with the members of the city council as well as the city administration about this fee, about the statute in the state of Michigan, which calls for a municipality to create an agreement with a school district if there are costs that go above and beyond the costs that are normally incurred for the collection of taxes. So for any school entity for which a municipality collects taxes, if they incur additional fees or additional costs beyond the costs that they incur by collecting city taxes and other taxes. As you know, our city collects on behalf of the DIA, on behalf of the Detroit Zoo, Clarenceville, Schoolcraft, Livonia Public Schools, Wayne County RESA, the city of Wayne, or I'm sorry, the county of Wayne. So there is a mechanism in the statute that says for school entities, a municipality may charge a fee and negotiate that with a district for any above and beyond costs. And so that really is the conversation we've been having for the past 2+ years with the city, is asking for them to isolate those above and beyond costs and to look to bring our fee in line with that. As you know, we are all desirous of being good stewards of our dollars, and that the dollars entrusted to us are intended to be utilized on behalf of the students that we serve, resources for our staff, and so this was really beginning to be a significant portion of our budget. So over those 2 years, we've had numerous meetings with city administration. Both Mrs. Smith and I have presented to study sessions, the financial subcommittee of the city council. I know all of you were present at the December meeting where we discussed this as well. And at that time, the members of the council who were present requested a review and recommendation by the administration regarding this matter, which really charged the administration of the city to come back and continue to work with the district on creating a new agreement that was in line, more in line with agreements that exist, if there are agreements that exist with other districts and their municipality. So we've worked toward that, and what we are bringing to you this evening is an updated agreement where our annual fee will go from just under $500,000 down to approximately $182,000. So previously, we did not have a per parcel fee, but for the few districts that do have a fee, they are primarily based on a per parcel fee. And so they collect, the city collects taxes for approximately 37,000 parcels on behalf of Livonia Public Schools. And so this new agreement that you have in front of you talks about the district paying a $5 per parcel fee for the tax collection for the year. There will be no escalator on this agreement. And so this is a 4-year agreement. That per parcel fee will remain at that rate every year of the agreement. There is a portion of time where once the city collects taxes, those dollars are put in an account, and there is earned interest on that account. And I'll have Mrs. Smith talk a little bit about how we will be dividing that between the city and the school district, both this year and then in future years. But a couple of the most important pieces I know important to the board and to our administration was that we had a limited period of time for this agreement rather than this agreement being in perpetuity. So that goal was achieved. That we considerably lessen, if not bring to zero, the fee that we pay. If we calculated a per parcel fee on our prior amount, it would have been in the neighborhood of $12.48. So bringing this down to $5 per parcel is a significant decrease. And though I know that in our many, many discussions on this with the board, that there is certainly also rationale to be made that the dollar amount could be even lower, or again, zero, as it is with many school districts and their municipalities. This does move us considerably in the right direction. And another piece of this that was very important to the board and the direction given to us was that there would not be a continuous escalator each year, which is part of the challenge that brought us to this point. Because certainly when the agreement was created 30 years ago, it was not at the dollar amount it is. However, there was a tie-in to increases of a employee group at the city. And so the amount paid by the district each year increased based on those agreements. So Mrs. Smith, would you take us through each portion of this agreement, and knowing that our counterparts over at the city are reviewing the same agreement this evening?
Sounds good. So what you have before us is something that's been reviewed by both the city administration and then the school administration. So we start off with just kind of the basic background of the law that allows us to enter into an agreement with the city, and then we move into the specific details of it. The first bullet point is clearly laying out that the school district continues to have the right to levy the school taxes, either 100% in the summer, 100% in the winter, or continue to do the 50% levy in the summer and the remaining 50% in the winter. That still continues to be the district's discretion. As you know, we just brought that to the board in December, a resolution that continues to authorize that summer tax collection arrangement, and we send that over to the city, so we'll continue to do that. The second bullet point is just spelling out, and this is a current practice, that the city will collect taxes on our behalf and then remit those funds to us electronically, which is what they currently do. And it references Appendix A, which is the pay schedule. And this closely aligns with what our current pay schedule is. We just modified it so that it would be appropriate for all 4 years of the agreement instead of spelling out a specific date. Going back to number 3, spells out the fee that the district will pay for the tax collection services. As Ms. Oka shared, the fee will be $5 per parcel, and that's per parcel located within the Livonia Public Schools boundary. And that we will pay that. This is a current practice that we will pay 2/3 of that fee in the fall, and then the remaining 1/3 in the spring. And then something new was an arrangement that we reached regarding a sharing of the interest earned on the tax collection. So as it is now, the city collects the taxes. They don't send it, the day that they receive it, so that they are holding on to it in their bank account for a certain amount of time, and they are earning interest on it. As it is now, all of that interest earned is remitted to the school district. For us, that's something that fluctuates from year to year. Some years it can be almost zero, and some years it can be more substantial. So what we've agreed to or proposing with the city is that to help them transition to this new agreement, because we know this will be an impact on their budget, that for the summer 2024 tax collection, they will be able to keep the full interest earned on that tax collection. And then beginning with the winter 2024 collection, we will do a split of the interest earned. So they'll send half to us and then get to keep half for themselves. And as the contract says, that'll happen for all 4 years of the contract. Moving on, the last bullet point, number 4, speaks to the length of the agreement. So this will start with the summer 2024 tax collection, and it will go through the 2027 winter tax collection. So for us, that would take us through the 27-28 school year. We currently have in our 1994 agreement the right to cancel with 60 days written notice, and that's by either party. So we wanted to make sure that we still had that. And then the last sentence was important to us, and that is that the parties agreed to meet beginning in January 2028 to negotiate a successor tax collection agreement. Because, as we've shared, we were coming from a different starting point. What we were looking to do, it was align with what the law said, which was those above and beyond costs. And we want to be fully transparent that that's our ultimate goal with the city. But we do, we think that by putting this language in there, we're acknowledging that we would like to come together. That this isn't an agreement that will go on for another 30 years as the past one did, but yet that we'll get together in 4 years and renegotiate with the city an agreement to continue to collect our taxes. I will acknowledge, we do want to say thank you. We do acknowledge that this is an adjustment to their budget, and it'll be an impact on their budget, just as it's been an impact on our budget for the last 30 years. So I appreciate that City Council was willing to take this up, and I know a special meeting was called by former Councilman Barr in December, and I appreciate him calling that meeting to order and the council members for making themselves available to discuss this and moving this on. I think it's helped us get to where we are this evening. So I'm trying to think if we've covered everything. I know we've talked in length about this multiple times, and most recently at our study session last week. And yeah, we're happy to bring this forward for your consideration tonight.
Any comments or concerns? Anybody have any comments? Mrs. Acosta?
I just wanted to thank everyone involved for pushing forward. I know Mrs. Burton had played a really big role in getting us to these meetings and orchestrating the meetings with our city council. But all the research and preparing for all of those meetings, we truly appreciate that we are at this point today, and we can't thank you enough.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mrs. Bonifield?
As I voiced last week, I have some strong concerns with this agreement. First and foremost, I feel like we're being sort of forced into signing this agreement. It's been brought to everyone's attention that if we do not sign this agreement, our taxes will not get collected, and we do not have an alternative method of collecting taxes. So we really are at the mercy of the city to collect our taxes. As noted, the spirit of the law is that above and beyond costs, we've asked several times about the cost savings that would be realized if the city no longer collected taxes, and the response has been consistently that the city would see no no cost savings if they did not collect our taxes. And Mrs. O'Quist and Mrs. Smith, you can stop and correct me at any point if I give an incorrect statement. I do not believe that the zoo, the DIA, Wayne County, all of those municipalities or taxing authorities do not pay a tax collection fee.
I do know that the city has shared that they do not pay a tax collection fee. I do know with the county of Wayne, they have shared that they have an arrangement as far as the interest earned. I believe that the city retains the interest earned from Wayne County,
Okay.
but they don't pay a specific fee for the tax
Okay,
collection. above and beyond
but
that.
Schoolcraft and Clarenceville do also, as educational institutions, are with the city, paying the city as well. In addition to the $500,000 that we've been paying every year, the total of $10.7 million over the last 30 years, that is not the only tax collection fees that are being collected by the city.
That's correct. We paid, of the total amount that they collected, we paid 87% of that. So the portion we paid constituted 87%, and then they did receive another portion of funds from Schoolcraft and from Clarenceville.
Okay.
Yes.
So in that comment, I'm assuming we pay, when you say the 87%, we're paying the lion's share of that fee?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. We've talked about the law, we've talked about the $10.7 million. I think another one of the things that really distresses me is that we, for many years, as long as I've been in the city of Livonia, have provided our school buildings for the city. We close school for the safety of the kids so that the city can take over our buildings. I would argue that not only can we prove a tangible cost for that, personnel, janitorial, making sure if it's a snowstorm or anything like that, the parking lots are taken care of, the sidewalks are taken care of, the building needs to be cleaned, supervised, and opened. In addition to that, being able to come up with a tangible cost for that, we also have evidence based on the fact that we rent out our buildings. If someone in the community would like to rent out the PAC or some of our other buildings, we have groups that come in and rent out some of our spaces. I know we've had a church come in. We have a cost for that, and we charge, and everybody else that comes into our buildings to use the facilities pays a fee to do that, which we have never, as far as I'm aware, passed those costs on to the city of Livonia. I think another thing, I think it's very disingenuous of the city to be utilizing school tax dollars to fill holes in their budget. As a taxpayer, I was very upset to learn that my school tax dollars are going to pay for the city budget. If I have no problem paying an incremental cost, if it were to cost the city a sum of money. Obviously, we need to pay our fair share for tax collection, but they have repeatedly let us know that there would be no cost savings if they no longer collected our taxes. I think the diversion of school tax dollars to pump up the city budget, again, sorry I'm repeating my words, but is disingenuous to our taxpayers. There is, and I realize this has been in place, and it's not as sudden as it sounds. We've been at this for 2 years, and before that it had been brought up. And the city has been slow to respond, has not ignored isn't the right word, but has not moved. We have not been able to move the needle forward on this until very recently, when, as I mentioned in the last item, the sale of the property came up, and we talked about maybe what our options were with the city, with the property, and then all of a sudden the needle starts to move on this agreement. Sorry, I don't want to repeat too much, and I apologize that this is very upsetting for me. I'm trying to read from my notes. I think another thing that that's been said so the city does have the opportunity to fill this hole. They could easily, without the vote of the city, the constituents, without the vote, it would be the vote of city council, could enact a tax collection fee, which would be upfront, and I think more transparent, that they're actually collecting a fee from the residents rather than collecting the fee from the school district, and that they could easily, I believe it's a quarter of a percent, if they did a 1/4% increase in the tax rate, that they would be able to fully fund the shortfall that would come from from us not paying for the taxes. The comment was made, I believe that some city council members had mentioned that if they don't collect the fees from the school district, that would create a hole in the budget and they would not be able to buy fire trucks and hire police officers for the $500,000 that we are spending. And I would argue that school tax funds, school tax collections should be used to buy school buses and teachers.
Thank you, Tammy. Mrs. Donofield. Anybody else? I have a couple, oh, Mrs. Jarvis, thank you.
Thank you. Like my colleagues, I'd like to thank everybody who's been involved in this. This has been an issue that we've been working on for 2 years, or longer really, and it's nice to see some progress being made. I know that both Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Oquist and others have done incredible amounts of research across the state regarding tax collection fees in other districts. In Michigan, we have almost 600 public school districts. And I'm curious to know, in your research, if you found any other districts who are paying a fee in the same sort of neighborhood as what we've been paying?
No, we are an anomaly.
We are an anomaly. So 600 other school districts who are following the same statute in the state are interpreting this and enacting this statute one way, and we're enacting it another way. So for 30 years, we've been making a mistake, both the city and the district, in how we interpret and enact this statute. It's nice to see that after 30 years of doing it wrong, we're finally going to make a move toward doing it right. And we can look towards those other districts to find out how this law is supposed to be interpreted and enacted. And what percentage out of the research from the top of your head, I know you don't have your files in front of you, but from the top of your head, what research, or what districts, what percentage paid between nothing and 5% of what they're, a smaller amount?
Definitely, well over 90% of school districts don't pay any fee, and admittedly, most of those communities are passing that tax administration fee on to the taxpayers. But we did find a few districts or a few municipalities that didn't assess that fee and still did not collect anything from the schools. From those districts that are paying an amount, all of them were a per parcel amount, and we saw that range anywhere from $250, and the highest I saw was $550. So this does, the $5 per parcel, at least puts us in that range of what we were seeing of those school districts that are paying a fee, puts us in that range.
So of the nearly 600 school districts in Michigan, 90% of them approximately pay nothing at all, no fee at all.
That's correct.
And of the ones that remain, they pay mostly in the lower range per parcel. So this will put us in that window, though.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good move. Again, I appreciate the fact that we're starting to correct something that we've been doing wrong for 30 years. That's huge. Again, it's hard to overstate how much work you've done. The amount of work that you did in terms of looking across the state, looking at the numbers, looking historically at what has been happening in Livonia. It's a tremendous amount of work. That's work that we shouldn't have had to do. I do know that the city of Livonia has a proposed budget on their website for the coming year. They also have historical budgets going back to, I think it's currently 2002. So that's a lot of years of budgets. And in their revenue section, they actually do have a line item for tax collection fee. And that line item, it historically has been around $10,000. Right now, it's as high as $40,000. So when they tell us that they don't know how much they charge or how much they have in their budget for tax collection fees, I have a hard time handling that because there's a line item that is directly that amount, and it's right there in black and white. It's $40,000. So where they think that $40,000 is the same as $500,000, I'm not sure that that's incongruous. And in fact, the amount of money that's listed as coming from the school district and from Clarenceville School District and from Schoolcraft College is not listed as a tax collection fee, which it is, and they've told us it is, but it's listed as a contribution. And it's, in fact, exceeds the amount. So there's a lot of other monies that they receive from our districts that are included in this contribution amount. And I, as a taxpayer, that worries me, because as a taxpayer, I would like to see the books and the budget very clean and easy to understand. I don't like to see things called one thing and labeled another in the budget. So my recommendation is that the city take a look at their books and make sure that they actually reflect what they're saying and what they're doing, so that people who do want to look at all these files that are available online can actually find the items they're looking for, and that those books are accurate. In the meantime, if they would like to move forward with this, and when we go to revisit it in 3 years, we can simply pull up that tax collection fee item and maybe use that as a starting point for negotiation in the future, since it is in their budget. But again, I would like to underscore my gratitude for all the effort that you guys put in. It has not gone unnoticed, and I'm really, really thrilled to be moving forward to resolve this 30-year problem.
Thank you. Mrs. Acosta.
Thank you, President Bradford. I know you've been waiting to speak.
No,
I
that's
just had, along the lines of what Ms. Jarvis said, is there any school district, or I guess municipality, where the school district is paying a per parcel amount and the city is charging an administrative fee?
I'm not aware of any. No, in every case it was, if they were passing an administrative fee, they were not
Charging
collecting a
anything.
parcel. Yep.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Acosta.
I guess I just want to say, and I appreciate everyone's comments. I know we've had a lot of, really important discussion about this, and that's been very helpful to us in our charge moving forward on this. I would say that in terms of us proceeding in a way that would be characterized as a mistake, the only thing I would say about that is that law does allow a municipality and a school district to enter into an agreement. I would agree that when this was entered into in 1994, of which, it's hard to put,
We don't
to
know,
know what was in the thought at that point in time. That was the agreement that was made, and the law does allow for an agreement to be made. I think where we all were in agreement and what you spoke to at the start was it isn't in the spirit of what is intended by the law. And I think that's really what we're trying to emphasize, both with our partners at the city, as well as helping our community understand this and why this was an important piece for our board to take up, for our administration to work on, and to connect with other items that we've discussed this evening. I know the board felt strongly that because this item came forward first, that the direction was that you really wanted us to get this resolved before we proceeded with any other items.
Thank you, Mrs. Oquist.
Sure.
Yeah, we really don't know. This agreement the original agreement was back from 1994. We weren't back there 30 years ago to understand why they entered into that agreement. And you're right, we were in the agreement and it was a legal document. I am happy to see the progress that we've made between the city and the school district. This has been a long process, a tedious process, a frustrating process, but it had to be done, and I think looking at the whole process and to where we are today with an actual agreement and the negotiations that we have made and how we've moved forward, I'm really happy to see a couple things that Mrs. Oquist and Mrs. Smith spoke about. One, the agreement is not in perpetuity. I think that is a real disservice to both the city and the schools to have an agreement that's in perpetuity, that no one ever really, obviously we can get out of it for 60 days, but something that's just a long-standing agreement is probably not appropriate for both the city or the schools, because people change over. There's a lot of changeover. There's a lot of things that change over the years. So I'm happy to see that this agreement is going to be a 4-year agreement and that we will be able to have the opportunity to rediscuss the agreement in its form. We did know that we're aware that the city had spoken about possibly adding on a 1% fee, which would align with what everybody, or many districts did back in 1994. We don't know why Livonia did not enter into that, so we had our own agreement. So I know that the city at this time isn't interested in the 1% fee being added on. So again, we need to get to the table and discuss how we're gonna come up with a new agreement. I am happy to see that the agreement does not have an escalator. I think, again, the previous agreement had an escalator, and that's what got us into trouble in the first place, as it continuously grew and grew to a point where it's impeding, on our side of the street, we're giving our money to the city, which could be better served being given straight to our kids. So that was hard to send over $450,000 annually for tax collection fees. So those two pieces I'm happy to see happen, that those are changed in the agreement. In fact, the fact that we actually are having a new agreement makes me happier. Is it the perfect agreement? Maybe not. I know we came to a $5 per parcel fee, and that I don't know that I fully think that that's the best, but I do see that it aligns with, I think, another neighboring district that pays a per parcel fee. So I think we have moved the needle. And just the fact that we're coming up with a new agreement is making me much, I guess, happier, I would say. Although I just do think we have a lot of work to do, or we can have some more discussion. But again, our tax season's coming up. We need our taxes collected, and this agreement will help us with that going forward. I do want to thank everybody who worked on this. I want to thank Mrs. Burton. I know that she's not here this evening, and this was something that's been on her radar for many years, since she probably became a board member. She was aware of this fee, and whereas I don't think it's perfect, it is an agreement, and that's what we talk about. We need to come to the table and figure out what we can do for now. And so for now, the agreement for me is okay. I see it as at least we're getting somewhere. We were able to, if it goes through, we're able to have a brand new one. So that makes me a little bit happier. So I don't know if there's anything else. Does anybody else have anything to say about it? Mr. Johnson?
I think most of it's already been said.
Yeah.
It's an agreement that it's hard to stomach. I understand that. However, it slashes what we were paying significantly. And I think it's a good start. You know, when you look at the fee, the city could charge a fee. It's all being paid by our taxpayers, one way or the other. The way it's going now, it's through our taxes. It comes to us and we pay over. If they charge a fee, they're charging the same taxpayer for an additional fee. It's all coming from the same pocket. I don't know how you square that. And maybe that's what council's reluctance is, to charge a fee when it's all coming from the same taxpayers, one way or the other. So it's a difficult decision to take a plan like this. But on the other hand, I know we wanted 0. That was our goal. But through negotiations, we've been able to at least make a huge dent in what we were paying. And I like the fact that there's no escalator clause, and it's not in perpetuity. That we can come back to this. And again, there's also an opt-out. There's also a 60-day termination notice. That if for some reason continued discussions brings us back to maybe they do charge a fee, they being the city. I mean, we can always opt out of this agreement and renegotiate something else. So I think it's a good start. It's not optimum. It's not something that I was hoping for, but it's something that I can live with.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? This will be going on the meeting for March 21st. It'll be a meeting, special meeting, so
Yes, please.
just so everybody knows.
Anything else on item A? We're all set on item A. We're gonna move on to item B, our financial update.
Perfect. What was emailed and added to our agenda, the board book, which the public can find on our website, is what we'll be going over tonight. So as has become our custom, every quarter we take a look at the budget and see where we are. We last formally looked at our budget in December when the board voted on the budget amendment for the 23-24 school year. I've got some positive news to share on the revenue projections for this school year. The first one being an increase in the amount to be received from Wayne Risa for a special education reimbursement. And I'll give you a little backstory. I know we've talked about this before. Wayne Risa levies a special education millage in Wayne County, and that is used to fund the county-wide special ed programs. As we've noticed, when we get their budget to review in the spring, that fund has continued to grow a very healthy fund balance, over 100%, which is very healthy. So we've expressed a desire for Wayne Risa to consider different ways that they can help, the local school districts. And so starting in the 21-22 school year, they started reimbursing us for special ed costs that we're incurring in the general fund that are not being reimbursed by the state. Every year we submit a final cost report to the state of our special education costs, and the state is working towards more of a reimbursement. It started at 28% of costs were reimbursed, and they've done some new categoricals to help to increase that reimbursement, but we're still not 100% funded for special ed costs. And so RISA back in 21-22 gave us $1 million that they called a one-time payment to help us with covering those costs in the general fund. They again in 22-23 gave us another $1 million. So I had reached out to the assistant superintendent at Wayne Risa before our first budget amendment to find out if that was going to continue this year and what I could budget for. And I heard back from him after our board, after you approved the first amendment. And the positive news is they have increased that reimbursement for this year to $2.4 million, up from the $1 million we've received the last 2 years. So something that was not on our radar, but is, of course, welcome news. So I've included that in this update. And I realized I should have started with the very start of where we started. I kind of skipped right over the big numbers and just went right into the details.
And I'll just mention that this is, if you are looking, this is in the most updated link that Mrs. Junta sent to you. So the financial update is updated in that link.
I'm so sorry, and I printed hard copies for you, and then I forgot to pass them out, too.
Okay.
If you'd like to
Great.
make notes on there,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome.
So excited.
Yes, numbers, woohoo. So backing up a step, I can share with the board and the community. This school year, we started off with a reserve or a fund balance of $31.5 million. And in the first amendment in December, we were projecting to receive revenue of just under $179 million, and we expected expenditures to be right in line with that too at $179 million. So ending with a very similar fund balance to what we started the year off, which is $31.6 million or 17.7%. and you probably get sick of me hearing it, but I think it helps. When you're talking about big dollar amounts like that, it helps to have some context. So the Michigan School Business Officials recommends that school districts maintain a 15 to 20% fund balance. That helps us weather the storm if, for whatever reason, the funding isn't coming in like the state anticipated. They have the ability to cut our funding mid-year. So that last happened to us in the start of the pandemic. The sales tax, people were staying home, and the sales tax revenue wasn't coming in as anticipated. And we saw a $2 million reduction in our funding that we found out about in May, and by that point we're well along in the school year and very hard to change course. So that's why we maintain a fund balance. It helps us weather any changes in funding. It also has helped us with borrowing when it comes to selling bonds to do our construction projects. We've gotten a higher rating from the Standards & Poor's, so that means less interest costs when we do go to borrow to do our construction costs. So a lot of benefits of having that fund balance. So that's where we're looking at in December. So again, now I'll go through details of some changes to our revenue for this school year. So we just covered the Wayne Reese's special ed reimbursement. The next one I wanted to bring to your attention is a new categorical that's brand new for this school year. It comes under categorical section 2711, and it's called Educator Compensation Program. And this was a new categorical that we did not have very much information on, and we just got the first payment in January from the state. So again, after we did our budget amendment in December, these funds are meant to help districts offset the cost of increases for staff, and these could be used for previously agreed to increases. So as you know, we brought collective bargaining agreements to the board. I believe it was 2 years ago. We're in our second year of those. So thankfully these grant funds can be used to offset costs in our general fund that we were planning to incur anyway. And that amount is $600,000. The next item I wanted to point out was interest earned on investments. Just as we're seeing in the private sector, we're benefiting from some of the increased savings rates. We're earning just over 5% on our deposits. And so we're taking advantage of that and keeping what we need to keep in the day-to-day account, which we bank with Chase, and then we're moving any excess over to our MyLath account, which is earning that 5%. And for this year in our proposed budget, I budgeted for $100,000 a month to be earned in interest, and I'm happy to report we're even beating that. So beating it by an additional, what I think will be $250,000 for the school year. So I would propose bringing that to you in our final amendment in June. The next item is an item called MIPSERS refund, and MIPSERS is the Michigan Public School Employment Retirement System. This is a relatively new categorical. We have gotten it for the last couple of years, but it's more than what we've gotten in the past. And this comes about because employees that work for school districts are automatically enrolled into the retirement system. And you have to stay for a certain amount of years. The new hires, you have to be with schools for at least 4 years to be fully vested. And not everybody stays 4 years. So in the event that an employee leaves before they're fully vested and opts to take their money with them that has gone to the state, they're giving back employers or school districts the portion that we put in on behalf of the employee. So if that makes sense. So that was that line. And for us this year, that's $100,000. They don't cut a check back to us, but instead when we go to make our contributions next month, they'll tell us to apply that $100,000 credit to a future payment. And then the last one could look like a bad thing, but it's actually, I'll say, a good thing. It's tuition for our LCTC Career Center. I guess that was redundant to say that, Livonia Career Technical Center, and for the Livonia Transition Program. I'm anticipating our tuition collection from out-of-district districts to be down $100,000, and that's because more of our students are taking those slots, which means it's less slots for out-of-district students to attend our programs. So we got that. We send that out after each semester. We bill twice a month, or not twice a month, twice a year to school districts. So we've just sending those out and realized that will be less than what we had collected last year. So on the revenue side, that will be an additional $2.2 million coming in this school year. So that's great news. Great news to share with you tonight. My suggestion, moving on to the expenditure adjustments, is to take advantage of this positive news. Something that we've been talking about for the last several years is the end of our COVID grant funds. We've gotten quite a bit of money over the last 3 years. And we knew that it was coming to an end, and so we've had lots of discussions of that when we are doing our budgets, and we knew that it was coming to an end, and we have plans to either absorb those costs or make some changes. What I'm proposing, because we are coming in more favorably on the revenue side, is to help smooth the transition back to the pre-COVID grant days. And so I'm proposing that we shift back some staff from the grants to our general fund this school year. So that'll be kind of a step down next year, that we won't have the full impact of that all next year. We can take some of the, I'll call it a hit, this year, because we have the revenue to offset it, and then we'll have some other grant funds available next year, some additional grant funds next year that'll help us transition back to the pre-pandemic grant days. So I'm proposing we do that with about $1.8 million worth of staffing costs. So this is not new staff that's we're adding mid-year to the district. This is staff that's currently being paid out of grant funds, which we keep in a separate fund, and moving those back to the general fund. And what that'll do for us, that'll take advantage of some of those additional revenues we're getting in, and it'll have us ending the school year at still at the 17.7% fund balance, which is $32 million. So that's just a proposal. Of course, we'll take the direction of the board if that's not something you'd like to do, but I wanted to present that to you and show you what that would look like, and kind of get your feedback if you thought that would be a good idea.
Questions? Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mrs. Bonnefield. I think that's an excellent idea, because we knew at some point those funds were going to run out. And we've been cognizant of that. We've been
Yep.
doing it slowly, stepping down.
Yep.
So I think it's an opportune time to do that. I also think it's important, we keep talking about a percentage fund balance. For the community who may not understand what that is, it is our ending fund balance divided by our expenditures. That's how we get to the 17.7%.
Yep.
And sometimes we throw that number around and we understand what it is. And sometimes people may not, they hear that and they go, well, what's it, 17.7% of what?
Yep,
So
absolutely.
I think it's important that we sort of give them an idea so that they understand when they're listening to us what we're talking about. Sometimes we can get lost in the translation, so. But I think it's a great idea. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mrs. Bradford?
Thank you, Mrs. Bonnefield. I also think that's a great idea. Just like Mr. Johnson said, we're making a shift, and we don't want to make it such a large gap, that shift. And if this helps offset that and makes a smoother transition coming off of those COVID revenues that we were getting, I think that this is a wise way to do that. So I would be in support of that.
Mrs. DeCosta?
I also think maybe that, I'm not sure if that's the staff that was paid through the grants were aware that that's where their funding was coming from. Sometimes it's scary to think this grant funding is ending, and that maybe that's a cause for concern in terms of their position. So it's great to be able to share that their positions will be covered through this shift. So thank you.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Thank you. When we look back on COVID, there was a lot of upheaval and a lot of negativity, but there were some good things that came out of it. And the ability to hire extra staff members, or to do some of the other changes that we were able to implement with COVID grant dollars is some of the good that came out of that. At that time, we were really aware, and I know that you spoke to us many times, about using one-time dollars and trying to limit those to one-time expenses. Obviously, you can't do that with all of them, but we were very careful, and it's nice to see that the dollars that we put towards hiring staff, which is, that hopefully doesn't have to be a one-time expense. We want to keep those staff members, and it's nice to see that we have an opportunity to do that by shifting these dollars in, and as you say, lessening the blow. I would rather shift the money and utilize these dollars this way than to have to cut staff members, because those are so valuable, and our kiddos are really benefiting from having the extra staff members there.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. I appreciate that. I know, and I just want to reiterate what Mrs. Jarvis said. this is strictly a budgeting strategy. Shifting these dollars is a budget decision. It's not a finance decision where, as Mrs. Jarvis said, we were very careful about applying those dollars, knowing that they were one-time revenues. We did use those to help beef up our staffing in order to help catch kids up on some of the learning loss that was taken into consideration. But again, this is a budgeting decision, just shifting dollars around between our budgets, that we were fully aware and fully prepared for the end of our COVID dollars, that we used them very wisely, and that we're not shifting them because we're running into a financial crisis or didn't plan appropriately. It's a budgeting choice. I'm very happy about all the categoricals that we're receiving. I'm assuming that since they are categoricals, that those dollars must be used for the categories in which we receive them, that they do not go necessarily into our general operating funds, that we have no choice on what to utilize those dollars for. Is that correct?
That is, yep.
Okay. And another question I have is that, do we have any avenue or capacity or capability? We talk about losing these federal grant dollars from COVID, which is going to put a hole in our budget. We've just talked about budget holes. Do we have any way to fill those gaps in our budget, or do we just sort of have to go with the flow? Can we increase our tax rates? Can we get a bond to pay our teachers? Do we have any options where we can fill these holes, or are we just running out of money?
Yeah.
I shouldn't say it like that. Are we just, the funding just runs out and we can't, there's not another avenue to replace that money? I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Absolutely. No, this has definitely been, something on our
Sorry.
on our radar, something that we've had lots of discussions as a cabinet team, and of course, every time we are talking with you, that's something that we keep on our radar and talk through, and we were very careful with the things that we put in place with these COVID dollars so that we would be ready for this day now that they're ending. And to your point, no, school districts are not limited. We couldn't go and ask our local community to pass a millage for us just for operational costs. We are very fortunate in Wayne County that we have the Wayne County Enhancement Millage that was passed in 2016. That helps, and we've been able to do a tremendous amount of things with those dollars. But as you said too, with the bond dollars, with sinking fund dollars, those are carved out specifically for not the day-to-day costs. Those are for our construction projects, and we go through special audits to make sure that they're used only for those intended purposes. So we don't have the ability to levy any additional taxes. What we do though is reach out to our legislators and advocate for what we need, and we have some very active legislators, and they're very willing to take our calls, which we appreciate. We don't always see eye to eye, but they're definitely interested in helping schools, and so we continue to advocate for the funding that we need. And I know they've continued to heed the recommendations from the School Research Collaborative about what is the cost to educate a child, and they're moving in that direction. And we, in fact, saw some of those items in the governor's budget for this next year, looking at additional funding for students that need special education, also students that are learning English, students that are at risk of failing. We're seeing some increase built into the governor's proposal, and we're just starting to hear, I think there was buzz of maybe the House's budget coming out, but over the next couple of months we'll hear more on where the Senate and the House are coming in with their budgets. But we're largely at the whim is a strong word, but we're largely dependent on the state and what the state does is in terms of funding schools.
Okay. Mrs. Oakers?
Thank you. And so I'll just reiterate that, because this is a really, really important message that, as you know, as a collective between the board and our administration, we have been extremely judicious and extremely thoughtful with the utilization of our federal dollars. So whether that was ESSER's 1, 2, or 3, or our 11T, we were very transparent. We talked about that at length here. We made decisions with regard to staff, coverage of staff out of those dollars that we may have previously covered in the general fund, which is really why our fund balance has stayed stable. And so we were well prepared for this. We knew when each of those funds were going to expire, and we have budgeted appropriately. I think you're exactly right when you say this really is a budget decision. And as I've shared with the board, our cabinet team has been working. We've already had 3 extended budget sessions. And we are not only looking at a year ahead, we're looking continuously at a 3-year outlook, because it is important that we have our eye to the best of our ability. As Mrs. Smith very accurately shared, that does change the per pupil funding, the categoricals, and the work that the legislature has done to beef up the funding to closer to what it costs to educate a child. We are certainly not overfunded by any stretch of the imagination, but we have made strides toward that through our state funding, but that is our primary mechanism. We do not have an option to go outside of that. So we are very prepared for this. This is really another proactive step. So that rather than waiting until next year to begin this process of shifting these dollars, we're recommending that we do that now. And that continued step down, careful, thoughtful, methodical approach will continue to keep our district strong and good fiscal stewards.
Thank you. And one other thing I think Mrs. Oquist touched on that I'd like to point out is we have a balanced budget. We're very judicious with what we do. And we have a fund balance. As a responsible school board, we have built that up over a number of years and stay within the guidelines of the school board guidelines. And at one point, we were below 5%, and I can't remember what the name of it was, but
Early warning district.
An early warning district, and we've been able to really bring that back, and we've been able to fund some programs. But I think the point is that just because we have a balanced budget and just because we have a fund balance to not have to borrow money in case we get a cut, in case something pops up, does not mean that we are in any way, shape, or form overfunded or even fully funded for what we should be able to do with our kids and to provide the best learning environment that we can. So because we are financially competent and stable does not necessarily mean that we have all the dollars that we need to properly educate our children.
Well said.
And does anybody else have any comments or questions? Mr. Johnson?
Just perhaps a factual. I'm not sure we ever became an early warning district.
Oh, we
did
didn't?
Actually, I want to say it was 2014 or 15.
The
We were
2.5% fund balance.
Yeah.
We were close.
Yep.
We were.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had to
We were.
report, didn't we?
And they consider that, they look at multiple factors. When I say they, it's the Michigan Department of Treasury. Our fund balance was under 5%, which was one of the indicators of early warning distress. The next is looking at enrollment, and of course, we have been in a declining enrollment for a number of years. And then they look at your revenue and expenditure trends, but based on our fund balance, we were identified as an early warning district, and then we had to share budget projections with the state. So thankfully, pretty shortly after that, we were able to pass the Wayne County Enhancement Millage here in Wayne County, and that significantly improved our financial position. And we didn't stay on the early warning list very long.
I stand corrected.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay, we will then move on to, oh boy, C, the LPS merchandise purchase.
Thank you. This is a fun one to bring to the board. As has become a tradition, every May they recognize and honor individuals that choose to educate our children. This is something that the National PTA does, like a staff appreciation, teacher appreciation week, I believe is the first week in May. So we've always tried to creatively think of different ways to recognize our staff, and one thing that we've been able to do over the last several years is provide each staff member with a piece of spirit wear, something with the LPS logo, the brand, that staff members can pick, and they get to pick what color they like, and we've been able to offer a variety of things. To date, we've done things like jackets and quarter zips and vests. We're looking to expand that this school year, maybe do some scarves or hats and whatnot. But it's been a wonderful thing to see, and I know our cabinet team has mentioned numerous times it's wonderful to go out to our buildings and see people wearing their LPS spirit wear with pride, and even not in schools, you see people around town wearing the spirit wear, and it's been such a nice thing to be able to do for staff, and I know the board has been supportive of that in the past, so we are coming before you tonight to see if you if we have your support to continue that for this school year. What we have found to work is allocating about $50 per staff member, and we have about 2,000 staff, so that would allow us to spend about $100,000 on this purchase. You know, the nice thing, of course, is we're able to do it when we're in the financial position to do it, but it's not something that has to be recurring from year to year. It's something that we can continue to look at each year to see if we're able to do it. In the past, we've partnered with a company that's done a wonderful job for us. They really helped facilitate this for us. As you can imagine, with staff in so many buildings across the district, they've taken some of that load off of us and handle so much of it. They generate a website for us where staff, we send out the link, and then they can go pick what they'd like. Then they get those items into production, and then they bag every item, and they will deliver them to each one of the schools. So it's been very seamless, it seems like, from both the administration who's trying to run it, and then also the staff receiving their spirit wear. So if you're supportive of that, we would love to bring that recommendation to you next week for your consideration.
Mrs. Bradford.
This is a big yes for me.
Oh, wonderful.
I think this is wonderful. Anything that helps bring spirit to our staff members and recognizes all of the hard work that they do. I know it's a small stipend, but I think it's so appropriate, and our staff works so hard. I think I fully support being able to do this. I know this isn't something, I know we've done it for several years in a row here, but I think it's just a wonderful gesture to have our staff be able to pick out something that they like and know that they're appreciated. So this is a big yes for me.
Mr. Johnson?
What she said.
I agree. I think it's really nice to be able to recognize people, and sometimes it's those small gestures that help to make people feel appreciated, boost morale. I'm sure when it comes in that all the schools are all abuzz and everybody's opening packages, and we all like to get something dropped off in our office on our desk or pick it up in the office. I just think that this is really a nice way to boost morale, and hopefully that's the way that it's perceived with the staff. And I think it's really nice to be able to, for our staff to be able to wear, clothes with pride, wear the logo and get out there, and when we're out in public and we have the logo on and people see us in the community and happy and stop to talk, talk to people, and just be like, hey, there's another LPS employee, and they're just like us. They're out buying groceries, pumping gas,
Yep.
and it's just, I think it's nice all around. Any other, Mrs. Jarvis?
Thank you. Not to get redundant, but I think it's just a small token of the high esteem that we have for our staff. They're the best. Frankly, we have the best staff. And we also try to create that culture, that sense of belonging. And we have a hashtag that says Livonia Pride. And it just seems that if you're wearing some kind of spirit wear, I'm looking over here at Mrs. Bradford's vest that says Livonia Public Schools.
And Mr. Johnson.
And Mr. Johnson as well. Sorry, I missed that. It does give you a sense of that belonging and that feeling of pride, and it's kind of an outward symbol of something that we're trying to make happen on the inside. So I really like to see that. I will support this definitely.
Wonderful.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Then that concludes finance.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bonifield. Thank you, Mrs. Smith. All right, we're going to move on to item 4, the curriculum committee, and I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Acosta. We have 2 items. Remember, we have a point.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, President Bradford.
You're welcome.
And our first item, 4A, is the LCTC computer lab equipment purchase, and I will let Mr. E2 take over.
Hi, everyone.
Good evening.
Is this on? Can you hear me? Good. I do have a handout for each of you, just to give you the quotes that were available. Thank you.
Is somebody collecting for Colleen and Crystal? Mrs. Bradford, is anybody collecting handouts? You have a pile, okay, all right.
I wouldn't typically have handouts. I know we're trying to save paper, but the quotes were not up on board books. I wanted to make sure you had them in your hand today.
Thank you.
So this is a request for the Livonia Career Technical Center. It's the purchase of new computers and furniture for our business management and computer repair program at the Career Center at LCTC. We go through CTE funds, our 61A added cost fund, so it's CTE funds. And we will walk through and replace classrooms that need some updating. In this particular one, it's been a number of years since this has occurred. So through contract pricing, we have one quote for computers, and we have one quote for the furniture. The computer quote is through CDWG, and they're quoted at $40,950, and that's for the purchase of 26 HP computers at $1,575 each. And then additionally, through Interior Environments, they're quoted at $48,354.35. That's the furniture quote, which would include a set of classroom tables, chairs, storage bins, and accessories for the classroom. There's also a furniture quote that includes an installation cost of $5,342. So altogether for that, for the 2 quotes for the computers and all the furniture is $89,304.35. And again, this is through 61A at cost CTE funds.
Thank you, Mr. E2. Are there any questions?
Pretty straightforward.
Is this one of the labs that we visited?
It's not one of the ones that we visited. If you're looking at the new fashion merchandising classroom, if you
Yep.
recall when you were
Yep.
in there and you're looking at the new fashion merchandising classroom, it's the classroom to the left.
Okay.
Just down the hallway a little
Okay,
bit there.
fantastic. We were able to tour that last week.
Yes.
For our study session, we were at LCTC, and a very impressive program, and well-received by staff and students. And I was at Churchill today with the Interact kids, and they actually said that they've ramped up the internship program, and that a lot of the seniors are part of that. So LCTC is an integral part of our district.
Absolutely. Wonderful vision by their principal and the staff. Looking forward to the next years with that.
And I just wanted to add that I know that we've approved several purchases for the Career Tech Center, but it's great to see them in action and know that they're being put to really great use.
Absolutely.
Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mrs. Costa. Just a question, Kevin. The 61A funds, do we have to apply before we purchase, or we purchase and then get reimbursed?
We work closely with Wayne Risa through the state of Michigan to determine what the total amount of 68 funds are available to the Career Center based on a number of criteria. So we know that number in advance and then can move forward with purchases that reflect qualifications like furniture and computers.
Okay, and just, this is a computer repair classroom. These aren't broken computers that we're buying to repair.
No.
Okay, all right, just wanted to be sure.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. And we'll move on to item 4B, the update on varsity letters. And I'll let Mr. E2 and Mrs. Oquist.
Did you want me to open that up, Ms. Oquist? Sure. Okay. So as you know, we've had some comments, concerns, and questions come forward from our club sports and figure skating, girls hockey, in terms of varsity athletic letters. And we're having wonderful conversations, and we've had wonderful conversations with girls hockey over recent years, and we continue to do so. I'm actually meeting we met last week, Ms. Oquist and I, with figure skating representatives and had a nice conversation over what they are looking for in terms of recognition, in terms of varsity athletic letters. I'm meeting again with them this week coming up with the coaches to discuss in detail what our process and procedures and policies are for Livonia Public Schools. It's something that we did similarly with girls hockey in years past. And it's quite detailed in terms of the steps we need to take as a district and how we do our process and procedures before we make that decision. We actually have board policy on varsity letters. We have board policy on student clubs and activities that work through our student activities directors and so on, so at the high school level and so on and so forth. But the bottom line is we're always looking to reflect on where those are at, what the guidelines are, what the procedures are, and working with our athletic council. So it's been an agenda item a number of times this year where we've talked with our athletic council representatives from each of the high schools, our athletic directors, and our principals, and we'll continue to have that conversation to see if there are areas that we want to tweak and have further discussion with you at study sessions and with the cabinet and so on and so forth. So we just want to make sure that it's known that we are having many conversations about what it does in terms of earning a varsity athletic letter or a varsity letter in general. Because all letters for Livonia Public Schools are awarded to our students through certain criteria, whether it's an activity or an athletic team, is a varsity letter that can be put on a varsity jacket. So some clarification and some communication might just have to go out with that as well, and then have continued discussion with that.
And I'd like to thank the board because we spent a good part of an hour to an hour and a half last week at our study session, and we were able to get input from you as our board, and to take a look at applicable board policies as well as our internal athletic and activity policies that have generally run through the Department of Secondary Programs and approved by the district. And so we really took time with all of you last week. Mr. Itu has had numerous conversations on this topic with members of our community. And I think our point this evening, and I think the board was desirous of making clear that this is an ongoing conversation, and it's one that Mr. Itu had been having prior to this time, as had members of our athletic council, and we will continue to do that. And that these decisions are based on the current policies that we have. As Mr. Itu said, if there's a desire at some point in time for those to be updated or to change, we would certainly want to have further conversation with the board. But we always want to maintain compliance to at least the policies we have in place, as well as MHSAA guidelines, as well as our practices as it relates to any other guidance we have either at the state or federal level. But it has been certainly a great opportunity for us to take a look at those practices, and we appreciate all the feedback that we've been given thus far. And we will continue, as you know, we had a lengthy discussion last week. We'll continue to talk with you about that over the next several weeks and months.
President Bradford.
Thank you. I do want to thank the administration and you, Mrs. Superintendent Oquist. The community, or some members of the community, have come forward with an issue that they're unhappy with or they want to see changed. And I appreciate that, whereas I think sometimes the community doesn't realize all the behind-the-scenes discussions and everything that's going on. I mean, I think we're quick to say, you know, they're upset, they want something changed, but yet we do have a procedure, we do have policies, and while we're not saying we don't want to listen to our families, our students who are desirous of a different, in this case, an activity letter versus club versus varsity letter.
Athletic letter.
Athletic letter versus a club letter.
Activity.
Yeah, I'm saying it wrong. Okay, there's three letters: the academic letter, the club or activity letter, and the varsity letter, which are all varsity.
The athletic letter.
Athletic, thank you, which are all varsity letters. I just have to make that clear. Even for myself, you know, there's three different letters. They're all varsity letters, is what I'm trying to say. Sorry about that. There's just a lot, there's a lot to how one earns each varsity letter. And I think sometimes the community doesn't understand that or they might not know, the communication that we do have these 3 different types of letters. So I think it bars having a good discussion about it and finding out, what other districts are doing or how other people do it, and then how our process works. And if we decide to make a change or a switch, we have that opportunity to do so. So, yeah.
Yes, and I'll just add that Mr. Etu and the athletic directors have been collecting all of that information. They were doing that prior, beginning a couple of months ago, collecting that information. There, certainly as we have different processes, each district has their own. I think the most important thing that we wanted to be able to express and did when we met with some of our student athletes is that all of these programs, whether they're athletic programs, club programs, or other types of teams, are valuable to us. Every single one of them, whether it's marching band, athletics, robotics, or many of the wonderful clubs and activities in which students put forth a significant amount of time. Each one of those has different elements to earn that varsity letter. And we value each and every one of them. We're also listening carefully to the feedback from our students as to how they perceive that. And what they are looking for in terms of recognition. So it's been great dialogue and important to us. And I know that Mr. Etu continues to work on this closely with our administrators at our high schools to garner their feedback, our athletic council, as well as our students and coaches. So I'm grateful for the time that he has taken. But I really do want to emphasize, because I know that we've had some feedback from members of our community who felt that maybe perhaps the activity letter was somehow being devalued. And so our members of our teams that work so hard, again, I'll just use marching band and robotics as just a couple of examples. Each one of these groups are truly valued, put forth tremendous effort. We are so fortunate to have such a wide range of activities for our students, for the coaches and volunteers that work with each of these, whether it's an athletic team or whether it's a club team, whether it's an academic pursuit or whether it's a student activity. We have some tremendous opportunities for students. We also have kiddos who work very, very hard in each of those areas to earn that recognition. So we want to be sure that we recognize that all of those are very, very important and well deserved.
And just for a point of clarification, to repeat what you stated, is that any recipient of a letter, and I won't, because just so that
What,
we
you don't
don't
wanna
confuse
listen to my
everyone.
description?
Right, with the letter, is eligible to put it on a varsity jacket.
Correct.
Okay. And then I had one more question. Can you share who the members are of the District Athletic Council?
It's 3 parent representatives, one from Franklin High School, one from Churchill High School, one from Stevenson High School, the 3 athletic directors, one from each of the high schools, and the 3 principals, one from each high school, and myself.
Thank you. President Bradford.
I just wanted to also say thank you, Superintendent Oquist. I appreciate that. That's so important to know that all these activities, everybody who does something is honored and we respect and care for, very much so. But in these talks, I also want to say it takes time. People tend to want an answer immediately, and I think the discussions, having the discussions are so valuable, but it does take time. So just be patient. I would ask people to be patient. We are working on it. We do recognize, everybody's concerns. And I think, I just want to reiterate, I thank you for having the discussion, and I think that will continue, so.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you. I appreciate you mentioning that we have so many activities, and that students who participate in these activities have the opportunity to earn a varsity letter. It really is important that we recognize the effort of students across the board, and that we also recognize that these are letters that are earned, they're not letters that are given, and that students need to meet with their coaches, their coaches, their mentors, whoever's leading their activity works to set out some stringent requirements to earn those letters. And every letter that you see represents years of effort and meeting whatever the requirements are for that particular letter. It's hard. And when you see a student who's wearing that letter, that student's wearing that letter proudly. They earned that letter. And even if we move forward and modify policy, I don't think that's ever going to change. Whatever letters you see our students wearing, congratulate that student, because it does represent an awful lot of commitment and hard work on their part.
Thank you. Mrs. Bonnefield.
Mrs. Acosta, you mentioned one of my bullet points was just to verify that every letter earned, they do have the ability to go out and get that really cool letter jacket and wear that proudly. I think we also had discussion about they can, anybody with the varsity jacket is able to put their letters or their patches and their medals and
Correct.
all their tchotchke, they can put that on their jackets, right? I mean, there's no delineation between any of the different categories. Everybody's letter jacket, they can put all their stuff on, okay. And then we've talked about that we do have policies and procedures, and it was suggested the other night that there may have been some other reasons why the specific student groups that were concerned may or may not be granted the athletic, they were considered a group under activities rather than part of the athletic department. And can you just talk a little bit about, we do have guidelines that this is not arbitrary, that the groups that are asking for this are not being slighted in any way. Specifically, it was mentioned that because they're women's sports, that was the reason why they weren't. And can you just address that a little bit and clarify? I know I believe it hit the news and a couple other things.
Sure.
And was not really indicative of the way that we do business in the district.
Absolutely. So we do have LPS guidelines when it comes to athletic teams that fall under our athletic departments at our high schools and under the purview or guidance or leadership of our athletic directors. Number one is through board-approved MHSA sports, which the two sports that came forward at the board meeting at this point in time are not recognized as MHSA sports. And there's criteria to become recognized as an MHS sport. One of those is a minimum of 64 teams in the state of Michigan, as well as some other criteria. And we typically in Livonia Public Schools, through our LPS guidelines, have followed that. When there was an interest within the community, we would survey the community, have multiple discussions, make a determination of which sports to potentially add into Livonia Public Schools. We take into consideration Title IX, where we're at a total number of teams for boys and girls, and then it becomes a board-approved sport at that time. Our last two were lacrosse and bowling. Then the second option with the LPS guidelines is an organization that's sponsored by a state organization, state-level organization or national-level organization, as well as is showing growth in that sport, where they're doubling their enrollment every year for 4 consecutive years, as well as some other criteria. Almost all of our sports currently that are under the athletic departments at the high school are board-approved MHSAA. So those are kind of the two criteria that we use. But again, the Athletic Council is looking at our LPS guidelines, we're looking at our board policies, and we are looking to have discussions in terms of there's areas where we can tweak some things if needed.
Okay, and also to clarify, and I think I was a little bit confused during audience communication, that the group said that they did not receive a varsity letter, and that the same groups at other districts did receive varsity letters, but they do in fact all receive varsity letters and have the same ability to have their jackets and pins and patches and all that kind of stuff, that they do earn a varsity letter.
I'll try to unpack all of that. So first and foremost, our athletic directors are doing the research with the other KLA schools in terms of which schools are offering a varsity athletic letter,
Okay.
which are offering a varsity letter. There's just different designations, and each school district does it differently. And what that criteria is, we're going off of what we currently do. From that standpoint, for instance, our figure skating club and our girls hockey club, if they meet the criteria within that club, can earn a varsity activity letter, which they can put on their varsity jacket.
Okay.
That's where we currently stand.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mrs. Frank, thank you for joining us.
Just a point of clarification, can you just tell us what MHSAA is?
Yes.
And what they do?
MHSAA is the Michigan High School Athletic Association, and they're a governing body for all high school sports that are under the purview of a local public school district and beyond that.
I wanted to thank you for this update, and I don't know if there was any other points to mention, but because this is important to all of us. It's clearly important to members in our community.
Absolutely.
And it allows us an opportunity to reflect on what our current policies and procedures are, and if there's, any need to go back and tweak what we have. But I also appreciate that it is, even though it seems like it's a blanket because it's a set policy, that each club or group that comes before is able to go through and identify how they fit within these guidelines. So it is kind of individualized in that sense. But knowing that, whoever comes forward, that there is a process and you're not really being compared to the next person that's coming through or the next group, if I'm explaining myself. So that we have equal comparisons when it comes to that, that process. So I appreciate the time and the explanation. And that concludes our curriculum committee report.
Thank you, Mrs.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mrs. Costa. Thank you, Mr. Etu. All right, we're going to move on to item 5, item 5, Building and Site Committee. Mrs. Burton is not here, so I will go ahead and operate that. So item A is the naming of the Early Childhood Center, and we're going to see Mr. Green. Welcome, Mr. Green.
Good evening, Ms. Bradford, Board of Education. It's a lovely evening. For those of you that are viewing at home, last week, as you recall, we had a robust discussion on many things early childhood, and it's very exciting as our registrations are opening as we speak for last week, and this week is childcare, and next week is SAC, so we're up and running. I look forward to providing you an update soon. We also spoke last week about it's that time to give a name to our new childhood center on Newburgh Road. But first, a little history. As you know, there's a great history from Jackson Early Childhood Center, and before that, Perrinville Early Childhood Center. So thank you to our community for approval of our bond that we were able to build a new early childhood center on Newburgh Road between 6 and 7 Mile, which is going to be a comprehensive early childhood center that will include the best elements of both former Perrinville and Jackson. So I wanted to take a moment just to recognize the various staff members, some of your own children perhaps, my children for sure, who have worked at Jackson and at Perrinville over the years. And we're going to honor that past, but we're going to move forward, and we're excited for our launch next fall of our new childhood center. And so I would ask that next week we have a voting item where we would have the board approve the recommended name of the Livonia Early Childhood Center. As we spoke last week, this mirrors what other communities do with their early childhood centers, and we've somewhat informally referred to it as that way when we've gone on site visits, and we were just out there again today, and it's just the name that makes the most sense. And the why of the naming now, we want to get going on our licensing. We have some things to finish up on that, and there's some official names that need to be listed on those documents, names in our IT system, naming in our student information system. So by bringing this to a vote next week, we'd be hitting another benchmark for this beautiful, beautiful early childhood center.
Do we have any discussion? Anybody have any thoughts or? All right. Okay, I think that's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green. Okay, moving on to item 5B, central office parking lot replacement. We're going to see Mr. Francis for the next few, so here he comes. And this is item B, central office parking lot light replacement. Welcome back.
Good evening again, everybody.
Welcome back.
That's a first. It's been years, and that was the first time that happened. Okay, moving on. All right, we have, so I get my papers out. We have parking lot replacement project that we are proposing, and I'm requesting for the board, I would like to put on the voting meeting for next week, the recommendation to fund this through, we are looking at the, I believe, sinking fund to take care of this project. So what we're talking about are the lights here at this complex in the parking lot. And frankly, the lion's share are in the bus yard. That's where most of the lights are. So we would be, you did see the Voss lighting packet that was in the board packet. That is, by the way, and I actually took a look at my memo, and I apologize for not putting this note in there, that is Omnia NCPA contract pricing, which is why you only see one item there, one quote. We would be swapping out the current lights, which are high-intensity discharge is what they're called. It's basically a xenon and gas type of lighting to throw off, similar to like headlights, old headlights in cars, to throw off high amounts of light. We would replace those with LED. LED also just as bright, if not more so, and much more energy efficient. If you took a close look at the quote, there is a little bit of money in there for rebate coming back, energy saving overall. So $54,990,000 is the quote. That was the total quote. They did subtract a little bit out for that rebate. I want to make sure the board approves the full amount, just in case anything. We usually do that with things like rebates because you don't know if they're coming after the fact, et cetera.
Okay, are there any questions or comments? Mrs. Bonifield.
Mr. Francis, you mentioned that this includes the bus lot
Correct.
as well? Okay, and are they adding any structures, or we're just replacing the current lighting?
We're replacing what we have in there. We are doing some swaps, like in the front lot on Farmington Road. There's, just because the heads are different, we can swap out a 2-for-1 type of deal. But essentially, the lighting that's in the bus yard now, they're swapping out the heads. We've been doing similar projects. It looks different than what we've been doing in the schools, but we've certainly been trying very hard, little by little, to chip away at the older lighting and getting LED in spaces. So we're really trying to do mostly a 1-for-1 on this.
Great, and I'm assuming that the additional lighting is going to be not only better for those very early mornings in the winter when it's dark and rainy out, but also that they would provide a little bit of asset protection, the additional lighting.
Yeah.
Will help.
Security element.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm not any type of lighting expert, but my little bit of reading is that the xenon lights have more of a glare. LED has less of a glare, so that'll be nice as well when you're out there when it's very dark and maybe snow and whatnot, and you're walking through. So it'll be nice to have the updated lighting there, if for nothing else, simply the longevity of the LEDs and the energy savings that we can achieve. So
Fantastic.
we're excited about that.
Thank you.
Excellent. Any other comments? Okay. Oh, Mrs. Jarvis, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Francis, will this lighting have any impact on any of the cameras that may be in use in the area?
No.
So-
No, I assume you mean ill effects
Right,
of the
in terms
cameras.
of the different kinds of lighting.
Positioning's the same. Again, both are similarly high output of lighting and of lumens, so it should be relatively similar. And as I mentioned, the ones that are there now actually tend to give off a little bit more of a glare than an LED.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so this will be put on for the
Please.
regular meeting.
Yes, please.
All right, moving on to item 5C, the Bentley track repair. Mr. Francis.
Well, as I mentioned in my memo in the packet, we did ask 4 different companies that LPS has traditionally worked with for paving projects, both large and small, to come on out and bid on this project. This is the Bentley track. Mrs. Oquist mentioned a little something earlier that we want to make some repairs on that track. If you walk it, it is an asphalt track. It has not been resurfaced in quite some time. It's had some cracks open up, some significant cracks as well. And so what we're looking to do is to not completely dig out, undercut, and redo the entire track. We're looking to cut out in the areas that have those larger cracks, et cetera, to repair those and then coat the entire track. So when you look at it, it will be smooth, it'll be evenly colored, and we can get some paint and even do some lines on it if that makes sense as well. This will be in addition to some of the fencing items that we had discussed previously, and those are smaller jobs. We're looking to fix up some of the fencing around there and paint up some of the posts, et cetera. So Nagel Paving was the only participant in the bid. I know everybody around this table is very familiar with Nagel. To be fair, they do a great job. I mean, they're pretty much the big players in this area on paving. We're not surprised that they did bid, and we know that they do very, very good work. So this is something that we are desirous to do. We talked to the board about this previously about doing some touch-ups over at the Bentley Field property, and since it's been quite some time since we've put any type of investment into that with regard to hard construction type items, we're still very supportive of moving forward with this project if the board is also on board with that.
Mrs. Bonnefield.
So, at Bentley Field, I believe LJAL
Correct.
uses that. Do they pay any kind of a fee to use that field?
We have like a lease facility use type of contract with them for all the items that they use. And that was just recently updated over the summer for coming into this school year.
Okay, and I apologize because I know you've touched on this. Do they provide any maintenance help for us, or do we mow that?
They take care of their area, so they are obliged to take care of the space. Anything to the south of the field proper, our team mows, and then
Okay.
they take care of the field itself. And those grandstands and those concession stands are all maintained by LJAL. Whenever might be a concern or an issue, it is still ultimately our track, so
Yep.
we want to make sure if we don't want someone tripping on it, et cetera. And I've had neighbors call and say, there are cracks, I walk on that track, et cetera. So we want to address those types of things.
And then who predominantly, when we talk about LJAL, if not everybody's familiar with it, can you just touch a little bit on that? And the purpose of that is that these are our students, our kids. I imagine that many of them are either in our sports programs or moving into our sports programs, and that I think, again, we want to be kind and good neighbors, but this isn't necessarily about the people across the street, walking on the track, that this is really a benefit to our student population, the kids, who is what we're here for.
Yeah, LJL, I think, is pretty popular in the area. It's the, now I'm going to throw it off if I try and do the letters. Livonia Junior Athletic League. They have, obviously, the students and the children who sign up and play, whether it's football or basketball, or they do now lacrosse, they have cheer, pom, they run the gamut. Any of the students can, but a vast majority are Livonia Public School students. A vast majority are going to go into our middle schools and high schools, which is why beginning last year and continuing this year in the football season, they used the 3 high schools, Stevenson, Franklin, and Churchill, for a game or two, because even the 3 high schools and the athletic administrators would also say, we want to draw those students in. We want them to get excited about, the Orioles playing eventually one day for the Churchill Chargers, right? They want to get them on that field, build up that excitement. So the vast majority, as you mentioned, Mrs. Bonfield, are ultimately going to end up in our schools and are in our schools now. So it's an investment in our own students, it's an investment in our own property, it's an investment in our own community, if you want to look at it that way.
Fantastic, thank you.
I'm happy to see this this kind of repair taking place. While it's vastly used by our students through the LJAL program, our community still does use that track. And I feel that that's a really great, this is of great benefit to do kind of cleanup of it and make it, it's our property. We need to keep it looking good, and I'm glad to see that we're doing this.
Thank
So
you.
this will be on for the regular meeting, correct?
Yes.
Liz has
Mrs. Jarvis, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Francis, is there any sort of a timeline? I mean, there's a lot of activity in that general area and more in the near future. Is there a timeline for when these will be done, the repairs?
That would be over the summer months would be the goal. I don't have a timeline from Nagel yet because we haven't awarded to them, but this is always something that we try to do over the summer when there's less folks around, have it wrapped up. It shouldn't be the same as when we did, like, let's say the 3 high schools. That's a much larger with the rubberized coating on top, et cetera. This should be a little simpler program, so we can get them into the summer, have it set up and ready to go for when the LJAL starts their football in the fall.
Thank you.
May I ask one more question? Or just a comment? I think we talked about this too, that this is kind of another unique thing in Livonia, correct? That a lot of these city sports teams and stuff are trying to get in between football games at their high school or playing on fields that aren't necessarily set up for as a football field or whatever they're using it for, that this is really kind of a unique opportunity in our community to have this location for the kids.
What we were told, I know Mrs. Smith and I had met on a few different occasions with the leadership with LJL, and what they stated to us was that they don't want to play every game at a high school because they have their own field and they feel good about that. Plus, I know a lot of coaches that want, and athletic directors that want students to be able to practice both on grass and on turf. These guys are a little young for this, but I'll go a little deep. You want students, you want players to have that experience on both, so they have the feel of both, but it's more of a pride thing where they say, this is our field.
Yeah, I'm really happy that we're able to do this. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson?
This,
Waiting patiently.
yes. Just a few years ago, I ran on that track. So it's sort of a soft spot for me. I will say that even when I ran on it, it was not in great shape. So this, I think, is, I think Mrs. Bradford said, the community uses it. If you go out there and just sit in the parking lot and watch the number of people that will drive in and walk, run on that track, it's used a lot. So I think this is an absolute necessity, and I'm fully in favor of it.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Okay, we're going to go ahead and put this on for the regular
Please.
meeting then. Thank you. And we'll go on to item 5D, the purchase of a generator. And Mr. Francis.
Always exciting to talk about a generator. So this is actually, you have the quote from Michigan Cat and Novi, and you're correct, Mr. Johnson. It is a large generator. It is a trailered generator. So the current one that the district has is not as large as this. It is a smaller, I think it's a 60 kilowatt that we currently have. But for the usage that we intend, we can take it wherever we need. That's why we're getting it on a trailer. We do things like pull the current one that it's replacing over to the big robotics event, or if we have a school that says we're going to do a field day and we need something, or there's an event out in the middle of our field, can we get a generator? Mr. Lau decided to upsize this one because this building, the board office, we are prone to outages. Everybody knows this little pocket in Livonia just tends to have some outages. And that will be large enough then to run the penthouse on this roof, to run the HVAC in this building. So if we had to come to work on a power, like a wind day, not necessarily an iced or a snowstorm, but if we were in here, and Mrs. Oquist knows we've been in this building when the power is out, and I've strung in this very basement many cords around to try to get some use out of a laptop, et cetera. So it will help us in this building. We've done some work to this building on the gas power, the natural gas power generator that we have. Plugs don't take a whole lot of that power, so we put many of them on that generator, and then we can use this new one. If we are on generator power here, we can add that generator to the rooftop. We've been working hard to try to get this central office up and running during power outages, because if we're down, then and schools are open, that's difficult for us. So we've done different things over at transportation and in different buildings to make sure that folks can at least operate while we're in a power outage, if not, at least temporarily, if not for over a whole day.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? I think it's a great use of, I think it will be of much use to us, basically because A, I like that it's portable. It can be used at other locations, and B, we do know, sadly, there are times when we need to, we lose our power and need to generate. So I think this is a good purchase. A good purchase. And I'm glad that Mr. Lau kind of what would you say, for lack of better terms? Upsized it so that we could utilize it even more. So to me, that makes good sense.
Yep. And if we get 25 years out of this one, that's a good
For sure.
long time. If you take the dollars you're spending and get it over 2.5 decades, that's good.
That's for sure. Okay, we're going to put this on for the
regular, please.
meeting. And that ends Building and Site for this evening. We can move on to item 6A, and that's the Policy Committee. And Mrs. Frank, we're so happy you're here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. We are going to go over our board policy, business management, EBD, energy management, conservation. Mr. Francis.
Thank you very much. I'm out of order here. There we go. We discussed this a little bit at the study session last week. The board policy EBD is full name is under business management, energy management, conservation. I shared with the board a recommendation to remove most of the interior of this policy that has some definitions or lays out the case for having what would be a full-time energy manager. The district started that program back in, I believe, the 2008-2009 school year. We actually have not had a full-time energy manager that can fulfill. We do much of this work, but at the time, it was a full-time job for somebody to go out to the buildings, to manage, to do audits when they're closed on a weekend, et cetera. We don't carry that out any longer because we don't have that person. So it felt a little disingenuous to keep on the books a board policy that laid out some of these things. But what we do want to keep is that to show the board's dedication to a culture of energy conservation. So we're looking to have the updated version of EBD read, "The Board of Education supports a culture of energy conservation. It is our responsibility to ensure that every effort is made to conserve energy and natural resources with realistic goals while maintaining a comfortable educational environment and exercising sound financial management. All district personnel are expected to contribute to energy efficiency in our district. Every person is expected to be an energy saver as well as an energy consumer. It is the responsibility of the school district to educate users on energy consumption and conservation." That's how it would read. Now, We know we've talked a little earlier about changing out LED lights. We've been working hard from a facility standpoint to maintain these things. Our administrator of facilities and operations still does the review of consumers and DTE bills. Finance does a review on those and checks, how is our payments, have they gone up, down, are they relatively steady, et cetera? Do they have dips when we think there would be dips, types of issues? So all of the items in between, we just feel like it wouldn't be right to have that in board policy if we're not having a 1.0 FTE person chasing those items down, but still having the culture and the climate of being energy conservationists as the best of our ability.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Does anybody have any questions about the policies? Okay.
That sounds good.
Mr. Francis, I think one of the things that full-time person did previously was to go out to the schools and see, did they leave their lights on or that sort of thing. But now as we've moved more towards motion lights, that sort of thing, are those, they're not in the classrooms for motion light switches, is that true, or they are? So a lot of that has been alleviated, just a suggestion, a lot of that has been alleviated because of the gyms, the major hallways are motion detectors, so the lights automatically go off.
Right, so some of the audits that were done was to see if, like during a break where things really shut down, it got to the point, because I was in this position with the energy manager, and he was not having the dings, if you will, because people became so ingrained. It became the basically the muscle memory of staff for 10 straight years to have those memos come out at the winter break or at the spring break, et cetera. People were automatically clearing out the refrigerators, were unplugging things when they left, to the point where the newer desktop computers are meant to be left on, and people were, for a while, they're still shutting down completely when IT would say, please don't shut down, you get updates overnight, you need to just walk away from it, and it goes into sleep mode, and the new sleep modes are using power almost the same as if it was off, but it can still get those updates. So we had ingrained that into staff so deeply that when we started to say, please don't do some of these things, they still kept doing them. So I think we did a very nice job with this program. And then once the 2013 bond kicked in, the energy codes that occurred, you were mentioning, with things like automatic lights on, off, occupancy sensors. We've been changing out LED. When we did the 2017 bond and beyond, it actually kicked in with LED becoming the de facto standard light. The industry had, before that, was still having, fluorescent was just made more sense because from a cost efficiency standpoint, at that point, it flipped. Fluorescent is gone, everything's LED, and then we've been moving around and doing those conversions. Our field houses, our gymnasiums, our cafetoriums at the elementaries, all throughout the district, we're doing these types of things continually.
Great, thank you.
That might have been a bit much, I'm sorry. I got on a roll with the energy conservation.
No, good to know. Okay, nothing else? We'll move on to the next one. Board Policy Business Management, EE, Food Service Management, and Free and Reduced Priced Meals. Mr. Francis.
This is really just a brief addition. So currently, this Board Policy EE reads, "The district shall operate a school food service program in its schools as required by law. The supervisor of food services shall cooperate with each school principal in matters essential to the proper functioning of the food service program. The Board of Education recognizes its responsibility to provide free and reduced price meals to eligible students." That's currently how it reads. We are not proposing changing anything in that. We propose to add, because of the state of Michigan having its Michigan School Meal Program where all students are eligible to have a free meal, we are proposing to add, all students are eligible for free meals as long as, 1, the district participates in the U.S. Department of Agriculture National School Lunch Program and National School Breakfast Program. And 2, the district chooses to participate in the Michigan School Meal Program. That would then cover us with regard to, via board policy, saying all students are eligible. This year, both of those are true, number 1 and number 2, so it codifies that students would be eligible to have a free meal, both breakfast and lunch.
You know, as I'm reading that, I definitely understand your intent. I'm wondering if for number 2, we should adjust that to say the state offers the Michigan, because it says as long as, so then the rest would be the state continues to offer the Michigan School Meal Program and the district chooses to participate in that program. Just because it would, just to indicate that it is also reliant on the state offering it.
So the state, say that again, said the district
So
participates?
the STEM would be all students are eligible for free meals as long as the state of Michigan offers the, quote, Michigan School Meal Program, end quote, and the district chooses to participate in this program.
Okay, we can, okay. I'll get that.
Is that
the wording for-
acceptable? Okay.
Yeah, for clarification, so both of those things have to happen? Is that why? Because it says as long as, so both of those things, it's not an and/or. They both have to be
Yes, it's an
participated in?
and I don't want to completely remove the fact that
No, I
the
do see
district
that.
must participate in the USDA's program, and then we participate in the Michigan School Meal Program. So we can look at the wording to not discount the fact that we do need to be a part of the US program. Did I clearly, okay.
Jarvis?
Thank you. Prior to the state implementing the Michigan School Meal Program, we based our eligibility on the free and reduced lunch applications. And is there anything, we're trying to encourage families to still complete that form because there are so many other things that form contributes to or makes students and families eligible for. Is there anything that we can either add into the policy or into the other documents related to this that underscores that need and encourages families to complete the paperwork?
I think we do that. I'd be a little cautious of having a board policy that says people have to or don't have, because we need them to for other reasons, but we encourage them to sign up. We noticed, if I'm not mistaken, throughout this year, is that at each season with the pay to participate, the discount, if you were eligible as free or reduced through the application, those spiked for each of those seasons because families got a discount. We did send out over the summer and then again when the school year started information to say, yes, there will be a free meal for your child regardless. However, here are all the reasons you need to, we highly encourage you to fill it out because there could be local community programs. There could be items from the state of Michigan that you would qualify for. And in school, there are items such as the pay to participate. So we absolutely want to continue to do those things. We're going to keep that program. If it's the board's policy, if you want to codify that type of statement in here, I'll draw something up for you and share it with you this week.
Yeah, I don't think it has to be codified in the policies, but maybe, I don't want to tell you how to do the administrative procedures, but somewhere, and we need to have it emphasized that is still a really valuable form.
Absolutely, and I know that Mrs. Jenkins has been, and Ms. Schuhart, who is our supervisor of food services, both have spearheaded that effort as well, so I can gather up with both of them and have a conversation about that as well.
Okay, anything else? Okay, we'll move on to administrative procedure, student EDDA, transportation.
And just to go backwards, President Bradford, both of those last two being changes to board policy, they would be on next week's.
For first reading.
For first reading.
Okay.
So that was read for
Board
you.
policy EBD
Yep.
and EE.
Yep, EBD and EE. Mhm. What we're looking at right now is not the board policy for EDDA, so there will not be any changes proposed to the board policy EDDA. Actually, we just recently, in June of 2022, updated this one. What we did notice, though, was just a couple of tweaks that we wanted to do on EDDA 1 and 2 under administrative procedures. Under EDDA 1, this is student transportation, private vehicles. And there's a statement, the original first sentence is the only item we're looking at. And it states, for reasons of personal liability as well as other consideration, it is inadvisable for school personnel to transport students in their own vehicles for other than school-related and specially approved purposes. We, in consultation with Mr. Etu, the Director of Secondary Programs, want to strike that last statement, for other than school-related and specially approved purposes. We're really not doing that anymore. This was from March of 1990, if you notice it on the copy you have. So it's pretty well dated, and Mr. Etu had stated that they really don't do that much anymore, at all, quite frankly. And it's not advised to be, having other items and putting folks in there. So we want to strike that line. That would be the only change to EDDA 1. Is there any? Okay. For EDDA 2, this one is about student transportation, but on our buses. It was really a conversation with the folks, the administrator and the supervisor in transportation department and some of the other office folks saying, take a look at the following bus rules. Do you feel like there's anything you wanted to add? The bus rules read, number 1, follow the bus driver's directions without argument or discussion. That can remain. For number 2, instead of just stay in your seat, and that's a big safety piece. We have, while the bus is in motion, remain seated and stay out of the aisleway. That's a big deal. We see lots of legs and arms and other things ending up out in that aisleway. Number 3 and number 4, we don't have any items or recommended changes there. For number 5, it says no eating, drinking, or smoking. We do have, just in the sign of the times, a new item out there that is, we want to change it to no eating, drinking, smoking, or vaping. We just wanted to make sure that somebody didn't think for some unfathomable reason that because it didn't say vaping today, it didn't count, so we thought we'd just put it in there. And then number 6 is an ad stating no video recording or picture taking. That's a general, there is no unauthorized or unapproved recordings in our board policies under JD anyway, but on the bus, this is just something that we wanted to, because usually a student stands up to do that. That's another no-no. I've seen some of those types of items come through. So transportation just wanted to put that down as a reminder to say, please, no picture taking, no video recording, because A, you're doing it against other people's will. They have not given you permission. And B, they're usually standing up and doing something like that. So we wanted to just put that in there.
Mr. Francis, would it make sense for, under number 4, to have that parenthetical phrase, no fighting or throwing things, just its own item? I don't know that necessarily goes, I understand it's connected to that, but I think that could be a standalone item.
Yep, I'll actually move it up to make that 3 and then drop down the hands and arms down to 4 or vice versa. So I'll make that its own item. Wait, and this actually would become 4, that
Yes,
would become
Vice
5,
President Johnson.
that becomes 6, and that becomes 7. Okay.
Phil, I don't know whether we have a problem with it or not, but along the same lines as 5, no eating, drinking, smoking, or vaping, do we have any problem with chewing tobacco, anything along those lines?
I can add it, or use of any nicotine product, but not really. We have very few, I'm going to have a broad statement here, but high school students don't ride on the buses as much. That's usually, but I have not, literally in the last, gosh, how many years has it been, right? I've not had an incident come to my attention on a bus of that sort but it's an easy add because usually you do see no tobacco use of any sort as a general
Yeah.
statement.
Yeah, that might, that'd be all encompassing then.
Anything else? Does anyone else have any questions, comments? Mr. Francis, this is, right, we can't get into a complete list, and so I don't know if there's a piece for any illegal drugs. I mean, how much do we have to go?
Right.
Like, how far do we
Right.
have to go? And this is administrative policy or
Right.
procedure, so this is
Right.
up to your staff, but I don't know if we add that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we add weapons. I mean, do we add something? I mean, that's in our school policy, and they're going to school, so they can't really bring it on the bus. But if we're saying no food or drinking or smoking, do we need to add that? I don't know.
You know, and there's an argument to be made for having some of these actually come off because they are just school rules
Right.
under JD. You know, but some of these were supposed to be for specific to the bus, and a lot of that was the stay in your seat, keep the aisles clear, those types of things. We're
Yeah.
covered. We can put whatever we like just to reinforce that, and I like that idea, which was the reinforcing of the recordings and the picture taking, and we can do that as well.
Yeah.
But you're correct, and what you said is that these are sort of like those non-negotiables
Yeah.
all across.
And I think those are illegal
Yeah,
Right.
as
it-
well.
so
and
anything like
the-
that.
The law may supersede, would
Okay.
supersede that, but certainly we can add these, as you said,
Yeah.
these are our administrative procedures, so we can add any one of those items.
Yeah. Mrs. Acosta?
I just wanted, I think the reason we went down the substance route or path was because maybe the misunderstanding of drinking as in alcohol, but I think this is just meant like no food
Right.
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
bus.
Right.
Yeah.
And it wasn't pertaining to substance use.
Right.
So I don't know that we need to go down that rabbit hole and include all the illegal substances that aren't allowed, since that's already covered under another policy. Because then when people don't see, the more
Yeah.
you enumerate things, the more people are like, well, this wasn't listed.
Yeah.
So
true.
that's just my 2 cents.
Fair point.
Yeah, and then just a small thing, but on number 5, down exceptions to transportation. I don't understand the mixed block or the mixed court, but I also, administrative procedures are for the staff, and so the staff understands it, and that's really who this is for. But I just, parents are expected to provide transportation to students with health problems if they live in the walking area. I just think maybe we could say something like, to students with health issues, or with, you know, just a little bit, something that's a little kinder with.
Yeah,
you know,
that's like I have a cast on my leg.
Yes,
Is
yeah,
what that,
yeah.
yeah.
You're saying the word problem.
Problems,
Yeah.
yes, it
Yep.
just is not.
I just
really
crossed it out, yeah.
Concerns, yes, with health concerns or issues or something like that. Okay, anything else?
Not for me.
Okay, thank you.
And that is just an administrative procedure, so
Yeah.
that will not be on.
So you won't see
Correct.
this next week
First
either.
reading.
Yes.
Okay, and that wraps up policy committee.
Thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Before we move on to item 7, I'm going to ask Mrs. Smith to come back up, and we're going to just revisit a couple of, from the committee of the whole, or finance committee, a couple things on items, so.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
As you will remember, we just shortly ago went over in the Finance Committee the tax collection agreement with the City of Livonia. It was under our impression that they were discussing that tonight and then would be voting on that next week, but they actually voted on that tonight, and it passed 7-0. So their City Council is in support of the tax collection agreement that we reviewed tonight. I know we had originally planned to consider that for a vote at a special meeting next week, but I wanted to propose that to the board. If you would like, we would now be able to move that to the regular voting meeting on Monday.
Okay, anybody have any issues with that? And Mrs. Acosta?
Would that move both of the items that we had slated for?
That would be my
Special meeting.
recommendation, yes.
Is everybody
That way
in
we would
agreement
not
with
be
that?
in-
That way we would not have to wait until, and have a special meeting on Thursday, March 21st. We could go ahead and move it over to our next week meeting, which is March 18th. Mrs. Bonnefield?
And just a note, Mrs. Burton would not have been here for either meeting, correct? So we're not changing whether or not she's going to be here. She was gone for the either meeting, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Mrs. Burton will be
Yes. She is out
not
of
in
state.
attendance. She's out of state for a bit. And everybody's okay with moving that to Monday, the 18th then? Mrs. Jarvis?
I would just like to commend the city for moving so quickly and taking that vote tonight.
Yep, I
Jazz
agree.
hands.
I agree. Thank you, City Council, for voting on that immediately. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you.
All right. We're going ahead to item 7, Personnel Committee. Mr. Johnson?
We have no items this evening.
No, okay, thank you. Item 8, Legislative, Mrs. Jarvis.
We have no items on our agenda for tonight, Mrs. Oquist?
We do not.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay. I guess that would conclude our Committee of the Whole meeting for March 11th. We wish you a good evening. Thank you, everybody. Good night.